Yeah, like it almost feels a little bit like he's got like shoulder pads or something too. But yeah, I think that's pretty good. We can save this for now. Okay. Well, we got our first potato unit. We gotta make him tanky as hell, given his size. And his helmet and everything. And his shield. Like maybe he could be one of the tankiest units in the game. So players are like, how do I kill this goddamn potato? So far, I've not been able to make my, like, system work as intended in that regard, though. Alright, so it's time to go into the next phase of our show, everybody. So I'm going to pause the music for now because I feel like it's easier for me to... Oh, you know what I should do? I should write down time codes. Oh, that's not really important, I guess, but it's easy enough to know to go and scroll through because I like to make these into little videos after yeah, and like clip them. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Brick Road, aka Brett Lowey, who has been on my podcast twice and who is a fantastic, awesome game designer concerned with the project of making single player strategy games. One of, what are there, 10 of us in the world? Like, and we all know each other. Maybe there's more that we don't know about, but there's probably more. There's probably more. But also there's maybe not more. In fact, there's less than 10 who are specifically thinking about strategy games in the way that Brett and I think about it. There's a few other people on our community. Actually, most of the people who are game developers themselves on our community are there because to some extent they agree with our philosophy about, like, you know, how to make single player strategy games and what even is a strategy game. So we had a conversation on the podcast, which you can go check out, you know, the Clockwork Game Design podcast. But then this was, I think, written like a day or two after that, if I'm not mistaken. And it's about skill compensation. So let's get into this. We got some Yomi. We got, oh, I'm excited. Images, always good. All right, something I've been meaning to blog about for a long time is a concept I personally think of as skill compensation. I briefly touched on it here. Let's just quickly go peep this. Harshness in games. Ah, okay. Yeah. This is just a very small post. Games can feel harsh because of randomness, makes things feel capricious or arbitrary. Too high a degree of skill compensation, feel overly judgmental. Oh, is this about chess? The game can combine long playtime with high end game swings. Right. So, okay, back in August, you wrote a thing like that about this foregone conclusion or perceived foregone conclusion. And actually, that's a really good point, is the difference between a foregone conclusion and a perceived one. That's like another article in and of itself. The game should seem not pointless without relying on randomness to make that be the case. Okay. Some alternative names for this game property might be feedback, accuracy, or performance compensation. Let's take a shot at a definition. Skill compensation is the degree to which a player's performance is reflected in the final outcome of a match. I'll make the text a little bit bigger so you guys can see nice and easily. Phrased another way, it is the extent to which the better player wins. Okay, yeah. And if there's an asterisk on here, probably because, you know, single player games, there is no better player. The skills measured in a game like basketball might include running, passing, shooting accuracy, passing accuracy, and decision-making ability. In a game like War, there are no skills measured whatsoever. Therefore, War has no skill compensation. In a match of a game that is primarily a strategy or decision-making game, a player's skill is primarily a function of how valuable their decisions are in terms of maximizing their win probability. EV. Interestingly, in a game like Yomi, for any given... By the way, I just got a new Yomi deck. I don't know why. I was just like... I never bought the physical expansion characters. I just played it digitally. But I bought an expansion character, Gloria, the healer, who was my favorite of the expansion characters. Anyway, side note, I played a lot of Yomi in my life. Interestingly, in a game like Yomi, for any given game state, turn of the game, there exists a single best play in terms of raw EV. Which 4 decks do you have? I'm curious. However, because the system has both you and your opponent act simultaneously, it is possible to win a hand by doing the wrong play. Frank Lance talks about this concept in his article on Donkey Space. This means that a given turn of Yomi has less than perfect skill compensation, to put it mildly. If we set aside any value of the skill reading or predicting the opponent. Well, no, even if we don't set that aside, it still has less than perfect, because even reading and predicting the opponent is like a percentage. It's like it's not no one can perfectly do that. It's like an odds thing. So okay, yeah. Anyways, EV takes all outcomes of a mixed strategy in mind. Right, that's true too. Player combat. This is from Serlin's website explaining how Yomi works. For people who don't know how Yomi works, you play your cards simultaneously at each other, and you flip them simultaneously, and then like attacks beat throws beats block and dodges, dodge and blocks beat attacks, and there's a couple other things to it too. I still want to know what 4 character decks Brick Road has. Simultaneous action in Yomi. Notably, Yomi still features a lot of depth, strategic consideration beyond possible beyond reading or predicting. Yeah, and I mean that's the best part of the game. And in fact, players who play the game a lot completely try to negate this and just take it out of the game entirely by doing their valuation, and then after valuation, in terms of like hand stuff and like how many like what is it called, hand management and all that stuff. Then they just actually have an RNG pick which of the 3 like options to play. So yes, the game is almost entirely this stuff, and I kind of actually really like this aspect of Yomi. But this is not an article about reading. I know, but I'm gonna go on side tangents. That's just how I roll, However, crucially, despite the fact that simultaneous actions tend to lower skill compensation, the depth of the game has not necessarily decreased. That's true. There may still be about the same. Well, actually, I would say, like in one sense, it hasn't decreased at all, right? Because the game has the same rules, and it's the depth is the depth, period. But also, like what we talked about on the podcast, it's a sort of effective decrease in that like you will be able to access less of that based on how many plays you're going to play in your life. So in a way, yeah, it's just, I don't know. There may be about the same amount of strategic consideration, calculation, and skill possible. Even though you might be rewarded for making the wrong move and punished for making the right one, the right or more correct move or set of moves still exists for players to find. True. This is also the case for games that feature a significant degree of output randomness like Hearthstone or Risk. Yep. While a given game may feature more or less of either, depth and skill compensation are not the same thing. Agreed. Totally. Man, I actually played some Hearthstone last night because I played Battlegrounds, and I don't know, for some reason I was like, I wasn't feeling it, and then I was like, I'm gonna just like play Hearthstone, and I did, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, maybe I could like do this, maybe I could like play Hearthstone, but then like you see some of these cards and you're just like, oh my god, what? No, this is not something. The right or best move in a mixed strategy game is to do one move X% of the time and another move Y% of the time. Yeah, it's about percentages. And in fact, I remember there was a tool that someone made for Yomi, which you could slide up and down your percentages of like attacks, blocks, and throws, and just have it generate which one you were going to do next for you based on that percentage. But like the existence of that tool also was like just really hammered home to me the idea that this whole like percentage play stuff and like risk management, they call it, is just, it's just not interesting. It's certainly not something I'm interested in. I understand how some people are really into it, but it's like, it almost feels like a distinct thing from the whole normal typical project of strategy game decision making and all that kind of stuff. It's more like a math problem or like a, I don't know. I would like to hear more about why you really like Hearthstone. Um, Even if you play that way, you can lose a single turn though in Yomi. Of course, yeah, of course. Well, that's a mixed right. Cards like this lower skill compensation, but may actually increase depth because players may have to contend with more possible future game states. Well, every new card increases depth, right? I guess. It's not that it increases depth because they're new cards, not because of what's on the card so much. Or like it increases depth because there's a new thing that can happen. It's not because it lowers the skill compensation. Just to clarify this line, like you could it's not like there's a direct connection there between these two things. But maybe that's not what he's saying. Just a clarification. There are also advantages to adding a system like simultaneous actions to a system. It allows for weaker players to have intermediate successes even when playing the wrong move. Well, this is true of any like output randomness or anything like that, right? It tends to allow for the hope of comeback. Same with output randomness. Well, it is output randomness. And it allows us to tell stories about how we just knew the opponent would do that, which would be fun and exciting. Same with dice roll combat, right? Like, it helps. It's sort of like, and that's part of how like D&D works is that we're, okay, like see if you can do this save. Roll the D20 to like see if you jump on the chandelier. And it's like, oh, I rolled a 1, and it like helps. Then you're like, oh, critical failure and all that stuff. Similarly, output randomness or any number of skill compensation reducing mechanisms can fuzz up the feedback and also allow for weaker players or players who have fallen behind to have hope. Yes. But at what cost? That's my whole thing to all this is like, yes, but at what cost? And is there another way we can do all this that doesn't have that cost? It can allow for a wider range of valid or justifiable moves, which contributes to playfulness. I agree, totally. And variance in a system tends to contribute to a variety, novelty, and excitement. Yeah, and I mean, so like, this is the argument I've been having for 10 years with people because like, we have all these games that are like, you have like basically the options right now are the really random playful games that have a lot of variety to them. And we have the more deterministic, dry games with like memorizable openings that don't have a lot of feeling of variety or playfulness to them. And I believe we can make a third thing that achieves both things. And that's a major part of my project in strategy games. Let's see. They increase depth because if you play, I'm reading some chats now from Steven. They increase depth because if you play a card with a 50% chance to do A or B, there's 2 game states, A and B. Right, not just one. Has more depth. I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Probably. Not the same with dice roll. That is completely black box. People actually are readable to some extent. Yeah, but like damage split, deal 3 damage randomly split among all enemies. That is black box too. You don't know which enemies it's going to be, and that's what makes it wiggle roomy and what makes it like random comebacky to destroy a random enemy minute. That's just as black box as dice roll. It is a dice roll. Reading with dice rolls. Oh, okay. I guess so, but it's just, I mean, to me, that's just, and I always say this, but like, yes, okay, so maybe you can have a 70 or 60% chance to hit with your reading, but you can also have a 60% chance to roll, like to hit with a dice roll. And you can increase the percentage of dice rolls by, having modifiers and things like that. Yeah, okay. Anyway, that is not to say that skill compensation is irrelevant. Some players may play games to prove something, in which case this might be a highly important property. Yeah, and to be clear, I want to clarify something about myself, because there is a, there's like in the competitive game community and stuff, there's a lot of people who are like, it's about figuring out which humans are the best. And like, not only is that not what I'm about, but like I actually actively think that's harmful to the extent that like I don't really even want to have like leaderboards on my single player games. Granted, uh yeah, like I like that's just not even appealing to me. Just to clarify, like this is not at all where I'm coming from, the prove something thing, or prove something is maybe a not fair way to put it, but just to rank players against each other is not what I want to do. I want players to be able to see how their skill is improving. They're playing, against themselves in a sense. That's really what's important to me. Otherwise, such players may find themselves feeling cheated or having wasted time in terms of valuing their skill and progress. Yep. Now that's the thing. Yeah, if you do want this, which I don't want, but if someone does want that, like a lot of the skill compensation stuff is very important for those people. Which I think like David Serlin certainly used to be that way. I think he still is. He wrote that Playing to Win book, and he very much had a philosophy coming out of the fighting games community that was very much about, he talks about even play fields as being like this really fundamentally important thing. And I also agree with him that they're fundamentally important, but for a different reason than he thinks so. But the likelihood of the dice roll. Hold on, I'm just making sure I'm catching up on everything. It's not the same in terms of storytelling as my point. I guess. I mean, there's more storytelling knobs there because like you can sort of get a sense for what a person is going to do and sort of like feel like you have that read. I get that. All right, so EY priest, but the likelihood of the dice roll, but you don't know the likelihood of your opponent making a play. The game is determining their likelihood based on their tendencies. Sure. Bad thing about leaderboards is the competition thing, but I really like the measurement of how well you understand the system aspect. Yeah. So what I would probably do ideally, like I would probably just do a normal leaderboard just because that's what is expected. And I think that there's a lot to be said for what's expected, but, as long as it's not something too like harmful, but I would like to do something where, there was just like, very, very coarse ranking. And, so I think actually even like StarCraft started doing that, where you basically just all is your like your what is it, like the metal color, like all you really know is like, oh, I'm bronze, or I'm like silver, or I'm like gold. And within that they don't really tell you much information. I think that's a good way to do it. So you have some sense of like, okay, like, I'm in the top bracket, I'm in the middle bracket, like I like knowing, in League of Legends does it this way too, where it's like I'm silver, I'm silver 3 or silver 1 or whatever it is. Like I feel like that's a pretty good amount of resolution. Knowing the exact number of player I was wouldn't make much sense in the context of League, but anyways, too many sidetracks. Okay. Also, having lower skill compensation tends to lower the rate at which players will learn or gain understanding about your system. Yes, and this is my huge system, my huge point, and it looks like my name is coming up. But whether this is important to you as a designer is a topic for another day. Keith Burgun has claimed, whoa, someone linking to the interactive forums. Holy cow. No one ever links to this. That's cool. Had that a fundamental value in strategy games is gaining understanding, but it seems to me to be unclear whether the rate of this learning is important. Hold on, let me reread that sentence. I've claimed that a fundamental value in strategy games is gaining understanding, yes. But it seems to me to be unclear whether the rate of this learning is important. Well, yeah, it's important because you have a finite number of times you're going to play the game, right? So if we don't know what that finite number is, but there is a finite number. And within that finite number, the rate is going to determine the effective depth. So like, Go could be the most deep game in the world, but if you're only going to play it 10 times in your life, it's effectively not very deep for you. because it's very hard to, or even if you're only going to play Go freaking 100 times in your life, it's not going to be very deep for you, because it actually takes, the rate of learning in Go is I think pretty slow. It takes a lot of Go matches to really start like learning stuff, um, for a different reason than one being discussed here. One thing I'd like to mention before closing is that games can also give feedback within a match, like taking a tower in Dota, reducing your opponent's life points in Magic, or fulfilling an objective card in Wingspan. The extent to which this feedback is valid in terms of contributing to your win rate is also interesting, but it's beyond the scope of this article. So, okay, actually, this is my favorite paragraph in this whole piece, because it points to something that a bigger thing about that also points to our conversation about Hop's article. So let's take these two: reducing opponents' life points in Magic, or fulfilling an objective card in Wingspan. Those are both score systems, basically. Magic is a race to 20 points, and Wingspan is just a race to higher points. But taking a tower in Dota is not like that. And yet, it still does achieve this goal of being feedback within a match. And so, to me, I'm not saying they're accurate. I'm saying they're feedback. Yeah, I agree. I'm not like disagreeing with whatever you're saying here. I'm saying that there's another point here that a larger point I'm trying to get at with score systems, and how you can do feedback within a match without relying on just points. Oh, you're responding to Steven. Sorry. Yeah, to me, this was pointing at, there's this other layer of this conversation that I have trouble like explaining, and I probably need to write an article about it at some point, but, and this is pointing at it. Like, I want things to be more like taking a tower in Dota, and I want them to be less like life points in Magic or fulfilling objectives in Euro games. And that's just the beginning of a different conversation. But the extent to which this feedback is valid in terms of contributing to your win rate is also interesting, but beyond the scope of this article. Well, here's the thing. It's actually not interesting in Magic, or maybe even in Wingspan. Certainly not in Magic, because the feedback is valid in Magic, like almost in a 1-to-1. I think you think I'm like, or I don't know if you're fighting with Steven still, but I'm definitely not fighting with you right now, Brick Road. I'm like making side points based on what you're saying here, which I think are indirectly important to this general conversation. Yeah. What was I saying? Yeah, the interesting thing. I think that actually opponents' life points in Magic is like kind of not interesting, because it's just direct, and it's kind of like the tactics being rewarded thing. Whereas taking a tower is interesting, because taking a tower could not mean anything. Like, if one of your lanes is super pushed and you just take one tower on another lane, it could ultimately like mean very little. So I think that this is interesting, and these two are not interesting. Like, as a very coarse rule guideline. Magic is about creating an inevitable board state. I'm not sure I follow that. To summarize, yeah, life points sometimes don't matter. Do you mean like if one person's just like way ahead of the other person or something? Because it seems like they always would matter. Or specifically, they vary in how much they matter. Like, maybe if there's like healing or something around, or like if it's a really early game, maybe it's not like a matter of like, this is interesting and this is not, but more of a matter of like, this is fundamentally more interesting because it's not just putting points into a point bucket. All right. To summarize, it is absolutely possible to have a game with high depth, interesting decision space to explore, and low skill compensation. Yes, Varying skill compensation. I mean, this is literally what everyone says whenever I attack random games. Um, Anytime I attack a card game that's like too random, like a Hearthstone or a poker or anything like that, their answer is there's a lot of depth to those games, and I haven't said that there's not a lot of depth to them, but that's yes, there is a lot of depth to them. Um, yeah, or at least more than some people think. I guess they say that because a lot of people think because poker, or maybe poker is a bad example, because magic is very random, that it doesn't have a lot of depth. But as you say, Brick Road, there's not a direct relationship there. You can have a lot of depth and be super random. Your argument about effective depth, can't wait for that article. All shortcuts oh wait, let's see. The best, I gotta catch up on some of this magic talk. Uh, Basically, the better a player is, the less they use life total to see who's winning. The game is very complicated, so it's hard to simplify. Shortcuts like life total are just heuristics for newer players. I see what you're saying in terms of like strategy, and I think that there's some truth in that. But ultimately, you win when the opponent's life total reaches 0, and so points, points taken off the life total are what's the term, are very direct feedback. I think there's other win conditions in Magic. Oh yeah, there are. I forgot about that. What were the other win conditions? It's been a while since I've like properly played Magic. Um, Deck out. That's right. Yeah. Is that something that happens often? I feel like the decking out is like not really um, a major thing. Some cards just say you win if. Oh, people, come on now. That's the worst thing I ever heard. All right. So let's finish reading this. So yes, this I agree. Varying skill compensation can have both positive and negative effects on your game design, depending on what other properties you're optimizing for. Um, yes. In addition, some players may find one range or another of skill compensation to be incompatible with their tastes. Sure. Yeah. Let me know what you think, and whether this brings to mind games as examples of extreme ends of the spectrum, but with variable other properties. If you're interested in games made with these sorts of considerations, please sign up for the Bring Good Games mailing list. Am I on the Bring Good Games mailing list? I need to get on there if I'm not. I'm going to sign up right now. What's my email address that I want for this? Probably just my main one. Boom. How did I not know that you had a mailing list? All right. Well, anyway, everyone go sign up for the Bring Good Games mailing list. This is not a joke. Let's get on this. All right. Notably, human performance can vary quite a bit from match to match, even in a game that's very high in skill compensation, like chess or StarCraft. Therefore, it might be useful in some contexts to talk about performance within the frame of a given match, rather than talk about player skills as an absolute fixed value. But then we can use skill as a short rough hand for average performance. Yeah, and I would also say there was another asterisk here. Actually, it's interesting that you didn't talk about single player in this because I was expecting this asterisk to head towards something about single player, but I guess for me it's sort of obvious like how that pans out and stuff, but yeah, very cool. I'm trying to think of like some major takeaways or things that I disagree with. I mean, Brick Road and I mostly, I think, agree about a lot of stuff. I think that when it comes to theory, and as we said this the other day on the thing, or I said this on the other day on the stream the other day, I think everything you do has like trade-offs, and like some of this stuff, some of this theory, I feel like is a little bit like on the side of you know sort of, I hate to use the word excusing, but like allowing for games to stay sort of as they are a little bit, which which just rubs me the wrong way a little bit. But like that's the worst thing I could possibly say about it. I think all in terms of the mechanics of stuff, like I don't disagree with anything that's in this article. I more just disagree with like this sort of there's a little bit of like an affect of like, and I think this is a legitimate disagreement and like a very valid position to have of um uh sometimes you want to just like lower skill compensation by having a more random game because you get things like this. And but my only counter argument to that would be, well, yeah, but you can get things like this without doing that. And or at least we should be trying to get these things without our playfulness as well. We should be trying to get these things without the cost of the randomness and the lowered skill compensation, because we can have both, I think. And that's maybe where we disagree, is that I don't know if you think we can have both. So yeah, hopefully we're talking about the same thing when we talk about skill compensation now. The idea being that we can dive a little deeper into effective depth, etc. Yeah. I agree, and when I write a effective death article, I will cite this as a good definition, because I think this is like good, and we need more things like this that define terms in a good, clear way and allow us to talk about things. Very cool. All right. So Brickrow, do you want to come on and do voice chat, or are you good? Or because I'm gonna do some more game dev, and then I'm gonna play Bob's game in a little bit. But I wanted to give you the opportunity if you want to hop on and say anything to do that. We mostly agree. Yeah, I think so. Um, all right, very cool. Thanks for writing that, and thanks for hanging out and doing all that shabazz. Um, and yeah, that's ultimately the most important thing, is that we're like just continuing this project. What types of games we should make, type of stuff. Yeah, totally. Um, you make